Hi, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company. I'm going to show you how to do our Picot-Trimmed Tila Bracelet. For this bracelet, you're going to need a number of Tilas. If you're using a tube of Tilas from our store, you're going to need 2 tubes of Tilas to do this. What I've done is actually done a collection of Tilas and done a couple colors. I have Opaque Teal Rose, I have Opaque Matte Red AB, I have a transparent Topaz, a matte as well, an opaque antique rose, a transparent smoky amethyst, and a matte transparent smoky amethyst. So these colors I'm going to mix together. What I've started with is I've started with a wide eye needle and .006 wildfire beading thread. I've grabbed an arm's length of thread, threaded the needle, and left myself about a 6-inch tail. At the end of the thread, I've added a stop bead. If you're unfamiliar with how to add a stop bead, you can go to our other video that shows you how. But basically, it's a different bead that's going to tell you where the bracelets began and actually stop your beads from falling off. To start this bracelet, I'm going to start by picking the beads up at random, and I'm going to string 3 of my Tila beads. So what I'm going to do, again, pick up at random. I say random, but I still don't like to have the same color right next to one another. And I'm going to string those beads down to the very base and the bottom of my stop bead. These 3 beads are my initial rows of beads. I'm then going to take my thread and I'm sewing down through the Tilas. Remember, Tilas have 2 holes, so I've sewed up through one hole and down through the other hole. To add my next Tila, I'm going to pick up a Tila bead and I'm going to sew down through the first bead that I've added on my bracelet. And as you continue, it's just going to be the last row that you've done. What that's going to do is make my Tila bead lay nice and close right next to that first row as I'm creating my second row of Tilas. I sew back up through that bead. So it's basically a circle of thread, and I'm going to add my next Tila in line onto my needle. So up through that next Tila, and I'm going to go to whatever bead is to the left of the Tila, and sew down the Tila. Again, whatever bead is left to the one that you're adding, out the bottom of that, and that positions the next one in line. I sew up through from bottom to top through the last Tila that I've done, and I put on my third Tila in this set. Once I sew up through that third Tila, I pick the bead that's to the left, sew down that bead, out the bottom, and then back up and pull the thread taut. Get that bead right in position. And I'm going to sew back through that bead that I've added. This is how I add that second row, and this is the same way that it's going to continue. Once you're done going through the left side, left hole of your Tila for the row that you've added, you sew down the right hole to the very base and the bottom of that Tila. Again, I'll show you how to add one more bead onto the row, and then I'll continue. I add one more Tila, and this is starting my third row. I'm going to put my Tila on my thread, and then I'm going to sew down through the right-hand hole of the Tila that's to the left of the bead that I'm adding. Pull the thread the whole way down through. Position that Tila right in place. And I'm going to sew back up through that same left-hand hole of the Tila that I've just added. And it's just like building blocks. I'm going to add the next one, sew through the one on the left, back up, and keep going throughout the entire bracelet. So at this point, I've finished doing all of my Tila beads, and what I'm going to do is show you how to add the clasp. I add the clasp, and then I do my trim on the sides. To do the clasp, I'm going to be using 15 OC beads, and I've come out in between my bottom bead right here, and I'm going to be coming out between the 2 beads there on the third. So I'm going to add Just 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 15s. You can use size 11s as well. I'm just using 15s because this is what I'm going to use for my trim on the side of my project. Nice small little beads. So I have 5 of my 15s on. And this side of my clasp is actually going to be my bead. I'm using a lampwork bead. I'm going to put on 1, 2 8/0 beads. Then I put on my lampwork bead. I'm going to put on one more of my 8/0 beads, and this is going to hold my lampwork bead in place. I take my needle back through the bead, and what this is going to do is take the bead right back down so that it's going to be worked as my clasp. I take this needle then back through those 2 8/0 beads, and then I'm going to add 5 more 15s and make a V and sew in on the other side of the Tila bead. So I finished putting on my 15-0s, and what I did was sew through my clasp twice. At this point I'm going to be adding my trim on the sides of my beads to decorate the sides a little bit. I didn't say at the beginning of the video what to use for the trim because you can really use a ton of different beads. I'm using 15-0s, teardrops, and 8/0s as well, just to kind of vary it up a little bit. So what you're going to do is bring the needle out at the end of one of your Tila beads, and I've already added a 15-0, a drop, and a 15-0. I'm going to take my needle through my Tila. There's two options here. You can either take your needle through your first Tila and pull it out. I like to, since the Tilas have a nice big hole, really reinforce the bracelet, and I go the whole way through my row of Tilas to the other side. Give it a nice little top pull. That way you make sure that your little drop is hanging on the bottom there. And I'm going to be doing one side at a time. I take my needle back down through the entire bracelet row, and I'm ready to add my next Tilas on. So all it is adding the Tilas up, down, through the Tilas, add on your fringe. Up and down, add on your fringe. And you continue with that pattern.